It is now my honor to introduce Ambassador Verma and to invite him to address the audience. Ambassador Verma has served as the 25th US Ambassador to India since December 2014. In this capacity, he oversees one of the largest missions in the world, one of the largest US missions in the world, including 4 consulates across the country, representing nearly every agency of the US government. As a former Assistant Secretary of State for Legislative Affairs in the Obama administration, Ambassador Verma led the State Department's efforts on Capitol Hill and served as a senior member of the staff of Secretary Hillary Rodham Clinton. He previously worked in the US Senate as the Senior National Security Advisor to the Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid. Ambassador Verma is a veteran of the US Air Force, and his military decorations include the Meritorious Service Medal and the Air Force Commendation Medal. The Ambassador has a distinguished career in the private sector, having been partner in the global law firm of Steptoe & Johnson and a senior counselor to the Albright Stonebridge Group. He was also a senior national security fellow at the Center for American Progress. In 2008, Ambassador Verma was appointed as a commissioner to the Prevention of Weapons of Mass Destruction and Terrorism Commission chaired by Senators Graham and Talent. He is co-author of their landmark report, World at Risk. The Ambassador is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and served on the boards of the Clinton Foundation, the National Democratic Institute, and Human Rights First. He was also a member of the Secretary of State's Foreign Affairs Policy Board from 2011 to 2014. Ambassador Verma is the recipient of the State Department's Distinguished Service Award, the Council on Foreign Relations International Affairs Fellowship, and was ranked by India Abroad as one of the 50 most influential Indian Americans. Ambassador Verma holds an LLM degree from Georgetown University Law Center, a JD from American University's Washington College of Law, and a BS from Lehigh University. Ambassador Verma, welcome to SNU.
It's great to be with all of you. I'm really delighted to be here. I won't touch this microphone again. I'm really just in awe when I drove onto the campus and saw these amazing buildings appear in the middle of the fields. It is quite an amazing place that you've built, and just talking to a few of the faculty and interacting with a few of the students, it's so exciting to see what's going to be possible, and already what you've done in just a few short years. I have been here as ambassador for just over 4 months. As was noted, it's now, I think, our largest peacetime mission in the world. Since I've been here, it seems like half of the President's cabinet has been here, along with the President of the United States, the Secretary of State. Every high-level visitor from our government wants to come here. I've also had the good fortune to travel around the country. 12 trips already in 4 months, from north to south, east to west, talking to a lot of college students, a lot of business people, a lot of civil society, NGOs. So this is really a terrific time to be here in the relationship, and a great professional honor for me. It's also a great personal honor for me to be here. My parents are from Punjab. My brother and 3 sisters were born there. My dad tells a very classic immigrant story, showing up in the United States with $24 in his pocket and a bus ticket. And that was in 1963. And he went on to get his master's and doctorate, and taught in the University of Pittsburgh system for 43 years. And he just retired a couple of years ago as Chairman Emeritus in English Literature. Some of my staff have heard me tell this story before, but I'll maybe share it with some of you. That my dad would remind me at all times when we were growing up about how connected we all were to India. And no matter who he met anywhere in the country, any Indian person, he would find a way to make some connection. That person is from my town. That person is from my village. That person and I went to school together. That was my cousin, brother's best friend's sister. And didn't matter if we met a person driving a taxi in New York City or a CEO. My dad would always say, you know, we're from the same place. We're from the same town. And finally I'd say, Dad, you know, there are 1 billion people in India. You can't possibly know all of them, and you can't possibly be connected to all of them. He said, well, you'd be surprised. You know, India is a very, very special and very connected place. So in the fall of 2009, I was Assistant Secretary of State, and I was invited to the White House to meet the Prime Minister, who was coming in for a state visit, which was a very exciting thing for me. I called up my dad. I said, Dad, you're not going to believe this. I'm going to meet the Prime Minister of India later this week. He said, that's great. You make sure you tell him we're from the same place. And I said, so Dad, I'm not going to do that. You know, it's not true, and you know, that's the principal reason I'm not going to do it. He said, I'm telling you, and he called me the next day. He said, you're going to do this, right? You're going to tell the Prime Minister of India we're from the same place. I said, Dad, definitely not. Definitely not going to do this. So the morning of the ceremony comes, and headed to the White House. Get to the White House. There's about 12 of us there to greet the Prime Minister. It's a very, very exciting time for me. And I'm going through the line, and the President sees me, and he knew me from the Senate, and he says, Mr. Prime Minister, this is Rich Verma. He's Assistant Secretary of State. And the Prime Minister kind of pauses, and he's looking at me from head to toe, and he's looking at me. He says, your family's Indian. I said, yes, Mr. Prime Minister, that's true. He says, where's your father from? I said, my father is from Jalandhar. Prime Minister turns to the President. He says, his father and I are from the same place. Now I just stood there, you know, thinking, gosh, I hate it when your parents are right. And my dad was right. President was kind of like, okay, move along. Your turn is over. But really a great personal honor for me to be here with those connections. Now, being ambassador doesn't always have the kind of impact that you think it does. So I have 7-year-old twins and a 9-year-old here along with my wife, and my 7-year-old daughter was on the playground the other day having a particularly tough time with another 7-year-old boy. And she was trying to resolve things in her own way. She was trying to say, you know, cutting mean, you know, all those things that a 7-year-old might try. And then finally she pulled out the trump card. She said, hey, wait a minute. My dad is the US ambassador. And the 7-year-old boy said, whoa, are you serious? And she said, yeah. And the boy stopped for a minute, and he thought, wait a minute. And he said, wait a minute, what's a US ambassador? So it didn't quite have the impact that she was hoping. But we have had a great 4 months here. I think this is a relationship that is on the, you know, a very dramatic ascent. And it hasn't always been like that. We haven't always had the kind of relationship I think we wanted with India. When the President was here, he very honestly said, of course we're natural allies, of course we're natural partners, of course we have millions of people-to-people contacts, but we want to be India's best partner. We want to be India's best partner. And I think there was a meeting of the minds on that front. You know, I'm very fortunate to have had not only the President come here in January, but the Prime Minister went to Washington in September. And for anyone that studies diplomacy or international politics or even just basic human relations, when two leaders connect in a very personal way, when two governments can actually talk to each other, a lot can happen. So from September through January, our two countries sat down at every possible level. We talked about civil nuclear cooperation. We talked about food security. We talked about defense cooperation. We talked about trade. We talked about intellectual property. We talked about all these things that irritate people all the time. And you know what? We were able to come to some pretty good resolutions. We now have a breakthrough on civil nuclear cooperation. We now are going to jointly produce and develop defense products for the first time. We now have an agreement on food security at the World Trade Organization. We now have a robust dialogue on intellectual property. I mean, we just welcomed India's move on HFC reductions. We look forward to what will happen in Paris on climate talks later this year. There is such convergence of interest. We signed on to a joint vision statement for cooperation, not just in the South Asia, but in the Asia Pacific as well. You know, it's something, we've had a strategic relationship with India for 10 years, but we now have what I have been calling strategic plus. It is of a higher quality, of a higher grade, of a higher strata of cooperation. Yes, we have our disagreements, and we talk about them. And we're now able to see down the long road about what it means for the world's two largest democracies to come together. The basic premise is very simple. If India and the US are the closest of friends, the world will be a safer and more prosperous place. Because underpinning these big strategic government-to-government relations is that we share basic values. Democracies, free speech, elections, civil society, innovation, tolerance, rule of law, peaceful resolution of disputes. I could go on and on. We don't necessarily share those values with every country in the world, let alone the world's largest democracy. So we are naturally drawn together. And we can do really big and really important things. And all of you, all of the students out here, I see, you'll get to shape the future of where India wants to take this relationship in the years ahead, from a business perspective, from a science perspective, from a political perspective. And we want and we welcome India's role as a global, political, economic power in the world. It would be a great thing, and that's why we're so excited about where we are today and where we're going in the future. So I do want to congratulate everyone who's here and in some way connected to this great institution, particularly the founder and the administration. It's really so amazing to see what you've put together. So why don't I stop there, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. The Ambassador has kindly consented to take questions from SNU students, and I would request a show of hands from students who are interested in asking the Ambassador any questions.
Good afternoon, Mr. Ambassador. My name is Vishakha Garwal, and I am pursuing economics here at SNU. I am currently in my 3rd year. My question to you is, it is really inspiring for us to see a US ambassador to India who is of an Indian descent. What is your take on the Indian diaspora that has amalgamated in American society? And how do you think that this will impact the relations between India and the US? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. You know, there are now somewhere over 3 million Indian Americans in the United States. The largest number of Indians living outside of India, I think, are now in the US, and the connections go back very far. And they have become a powerful bloc, and very active politically, a lot of organizations. It's funny, when I used to speak to a lot of Indian American groups in the United States, and when I would go into a room of 30 people and I would ask them to introduce themselves, there would be 30 presidents of different Indian American organizations. And I thought maybe some consolidation would be in order. But it just gives you some idea. I mean, they're very active. They were instrumental in the civil nuclear deal, in getting that passed. I have also encouraged, you know, I was the president of an organization called the Indian American Bar Association. And I thought, well, really, we should call this the South Asian Bar Association, which was this big controversial move at the time, but it was great. So it's now a thriving kind of legal organization for lawyers from all across South Asia. And so I think that's a good development. The thing I say to Indian diaspora groups all the time is that not everyone has made it. Not everyone is a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. And frankly, I think my parents would still be happy if I went to medical school tomorrow. Then they know I'd really made it. But you know, there are still a lot of people on the margins, and people who struggle, and people that have challenges, basic immigration, new immigrant experiences to the United States like they might have in any other country. And we have to look out for those folks too, and be their voice. And so I try to do that. And I think all of you know this, but as you go out and as you be successful, one of the best things you can do is give back to your community and give back to all those people that helped you get to where you are today.
Other questions?
Good afternoon, Mr. Ambassador. I am Monica Singh from Electronics and Communication Engineering, second year. There is a growing dynamism in the Indo-US relations, which was evident from Mr. Obama's visit to India in the January 2015 and our Prime Minister Narendra Modi's recent visits. So my question to you is, what is your view on the key emerging areas of collaboration between the two nations, and how do you think the Indo-US relationship will impact the youth of India?
That's a great question. I'd say there are some core pillars of the relationship, and all of you have to think about how you fit into that. And so, obviously, defense and security cooperation is a key, and what we do in sharing of intelligence and building of defense products together and training together and having our militaries operate together. Clean energy and climate is the second big area I would mention. I think there is an incredible need in this country and in the United States, frankly, for innovative solutions to climate change and to carbon-based sources of energy. That's why we're so interested in supporting India's wind and solar and biomass and Clean India campaigns, and also on civil nuclear, on economics and trade, on space cooperation, science cooperation, education, healthcare, development. We are now working with India in 3 African countries. We're now working with India to do skills training in Afghanistan. I mean, this is what I talk about. The potential for our 2 countries is not what we can do for each other. As the Prime Minister rightly said in his Time magazine interview this week, he said it's what we can do together around the world. I think that's where the future lies. And look, there's great promise for all of you, not just in the bilateral context, but in your role in where you want to take India, what you want to do for this country politically and economically, socially. All those issues are there for you. So we as the United States want to be part of that. No question about it, but I think you've got a great and promising future in front of you in your own right.
The question. Back.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Vidhi Jain, Electrical Branch, third year, and I have a question for you. Sir, India is emerging as a viable global leader, both economically and politically. How do you think India can play a constructive role in the international system?
So, India already is playing a constructive role in the international system. You know, India is maybe the lead country when it comes to peacekeeping. India has played a lead in the G20 and economic issues. And we have to make sure that the institutions that have been formed since World War II actually support India's role as well. And what I mean by that is, you know, does it make sense to have a Security Council that doesn't include India? When the president was here in 2010, he said any reformed UN Security Council should have a seat for India. And again, I think we'll see, and just in recent weeks, we've seen India came to the aid of the United States to take American citizens out of Yemen. And we are grateful and thankful for that. When it came to the tragic earthquake in Nepal 2 weeks ago, India led the response. So we know what's possible. And we also, I think, we also know that history can sometimes be a limitation, and that history didn't necessarily have a role or a voice or a place for India in these big institutions. So we have to make sure they function for India. But we also now have to make sure that India wants to play that role. So I bring up Paris and the climate talks as kind of maybe the big next test. I don't think it's an overstatement to say the world is watching to see what India will do. And I've already said that I don't think it's an us versus them, a developed versus developing world. This is very much not only a 1992 or 62 or 72 mindset. We have to get away from that. We're now partners. We're in this together. And so, you know, I just think the future is really promising for India's leadership role, and we support it strongly.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, Mr. Ambassador. I'm Shaurya Bajaj from BTech CSC third year. Many of the students of our own university have secured admissions in the top universities of the United States, and many of us still dream of getting through them in the near future. So, I'd like to ask you, what is your one piece of advice that you would like to share with us that would help us in planning for the admissions in the near future in the United States?
So my kids are little, so I don't have to give them this advice yet. You know, it's so, look, you guys face a very competitive marketplace in higher education. I've also seen the numbers of the statistics of what it takes to get into the top schools in India. I mean, just to be honest, I don't think I'd be getting in anywhere in India or in the top schools in the United States, given how tough the competition is these days. But look, I think there's no shortcut and there's no secret, and that it comes down to, you know, hard work, great grades, being well-rounded in what you do, having a good reputation. All those things matter. I guess the only thing I would say to you is that sometimes we get so focused on the kind of, you know, great universities. And sometimes I feel like great is very much in the eye of the beholder. And when you think of American colleges, just like when you think of Indian colleges, to think broadly, and that you may have a great experience at a school that might not be in the US News and World Report's top 25. You know, maybe it's number 60, or maybe it's number 160. but it really is what you make of it and what you do when you get there. And so I just maybe encourage all of you to think a bit more broadly. There are great state schools, there are great smaller colleges all across the United States, all across Canada, all across India. And so don't feel or don't be disappointed if you don't get into the top 10 or top 15, because not everyone can, and that's okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Ambassador. I am Ashwat Vaidyanathan from Mechanical Engineering, second year. And I wanted to ask you, what is expected out of India from this India-US relationship?
That's an open-ended question, so how should I answer that? You know, in a close partnership and in a close friendship, you know, both sides have to work at it. And so, like, maybe I'll just answer it the other way. What's expected of us? What's expected of the United States? And that's to show that we're there through tough times and good times, that we will get our latest and greatest technology out of the United States, that we have conversations on issues that matter to the Indians, whether it's immigration or whether it's security assistance in this part of the world. You know, the breakthroughs that we have not just been about changes in New Delhi, they've been about changes in mindset in Washington too. And so both sides have to continue to show that they are dependable, that they are you know, solid friends, and we've demonstrated that over the years, and we will continue to do so. So I don't think there's anything specific that we're looking for. This isn't, you know, I think to think of it as a transactional relationship is probably too limiting. And I think we have to go back to those overarching values that keep us naturally aligned in so many ways.
Good afternoon, Mr. Ambassador. I am Kartikeya Agarwal, sophomore, pursuing Electronics and Communication Engineering. Sir, in light of India's recent successful space expedition program to Mars, where do you think are the opportunities for India and US collaborating and cooperating for space exploration?
This is a great question, and I'm actually, you know, I'm excited about clean energy and other areas. I'm most potentially excited about space, not because I wanted to be an astronaut as a kid, and I did, but I think the potential is really, really so unlimited. I spoke to a group of students the other day that were selected to go to the United States for 2 weeks to study. And one thing I said to them, which is really so mind-boggling to me, is that the person that will walk on Mars, on the surface of Mars, is alive today. If you think about that individual is somewhere on this planet, could be in this room, could be in a high school or junior high somewhere. That's just the kind of potential that's out there. We're working very aggressively on that. I think our space agencies and our scientists are natural partners. And we saw it briefly with the Mars exploration, where we provided some basic navigational support. I would love to see so much more, and in fact, I'll be seeing our administrator for NASA when I'm in Washington in a few weeks. I really hope we can push this kind of cooperation in the future.
Good afternoon, Mr. Ambassador. My name is Harsh Kejriwal. I'm from third year CSE, and my question to you is, what is your experience being an Indian as a US ambassador, and how has it affected you personally?
It's a good question. You know, what I've told people is that this is a really big and really complicated job. As I said, we've got over 2,000 people, the largest peacetime mission every agency of our government. Every possible issue under the sun comes up on a daily basis. You know, the most important thing is that you do a good job in the position. You know, and you're here on behalf of the president. It's there's a lot of pressure to actually do a good job. So that's the most important thing, and you're here to represent and advance U.S. policy. But obviously, I was here as a kid living with my grandmother for a summer. You know, I told you the story of my parents and how they immigrated in the 60s. We have cousins here. We have a lot of connections here and understanding of the history and the culture and everything else. So, you know, that's why it's such a personal honor for me at the same time. I will leave it to others to judge whether that's an advantage or a disadvantage. I would just say we've been exceptionally warmly welcomed since we've been here, and it's just been very exciting.
Maybe a couple of other questions.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Sharnik, an undergrad economics student at SNU. So the people of United States would be electing the new president in the coming year. So what are the key expectations? What are the key expectations that the people have from the new government, and how would it impact India?
You're talking about U.S. elections?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And our elections take about 2 years to launch and go through. You know, one of the great things about, I think that we've seen in the United States in the past 20 years is, you know, if not bipartisan, perhaps even a non-approach to how we deal with India. From Bill Clinton, who was very popular here at the end of his term, to George H.W. Bush, who was very popular in a lot of the initiatives he launched here in 2005, to now President Obama, to our House and our Senate. When you look at our House of Representatives, the body that has been formed to focus on U.S.-India relationships, the House India Caucus, is the single largest caucus in the House of Representatives. Republicans, Democrats, you name it. There's several hundred members in that caucus. And again, I just think regardless of what party or what person happens to take office next November, this relationship will continue to be strong. In terms of what issues the American people are expecting out of the president, it will sound somewhat familiar to probably what you hear here. You know, job creation, economic growth, good governance, security. I mean, they're the same issues in our communities as issues that you have here. Keeping the American recovery going. I think the economy and you know, America's role in the world will continue to be the dominant questions.
Good afternoon, Mr. Ambassador. I'm Pradeep. I'm doing my PhD in solar thermal engineering, and I also been selected for an internship to US to work in National Renewable Laboratory. And my question for you today is that in clean energy, there are two types. One is PV and thermal. So I want to know from the high in the order, like what would be the talk going on, whether to switch it more to PV or to thermal. Solar thermal systems.
So I do have an undergraduate degree in engineering, but probably it's been a long time since I've. So are those the two types of solar? Sorry.
So basically, there's two types. One is the PV photovoltaics and the thermal.
Both kinds of solar.
Like in Arizona, a lot of places the parabolic troughs are being placed.
Yeah.
So in the US, like a lot of things are going on.
Yeah.
It is going on to PV or thermal. That is not the future of solar. That's what I want to know. Whether there is a talk about that to concentrate more on PV or thermal.
That is a really, really good question. Are there any professors of engineering here who could help me with that? I actually have no idea, but let me answer it this way. which is, in all seriousness, India has set a renewable target on solar of 100 gigawatts. I do know that. They've set a target of 75 gigawatts on wind. I know that we have come forward, the United States, with $3 billion in financing, which is a lot, but it's not anywhere close to what's needed to fully develop and help connect the 300 million people that still don't have access to electricity. What you're talking about in your question is really points to, I think, the area where all of us have to work together on solving this climate, pollution, development, electricity conundrum. And do you have to make a choice between development and clean energy? I don't think so. I think the world and the world economy has shown that the green economy can actually generate more jobs and help an economy grow than traditional carbon-based sources. We know that India is going to be relying on coal for still many years, and we understand that. But working on financing and technology, maybe we can help India actually leapfrog over, frankly, several decades of where it took us to try to get to where we are today. So I hope you solve that question, and I hope you stay engaged in the field, because I think it's so important.
Very good afternoon, sir. I'm Aditi, and I'm a first year biotech student. Sorry, I had to use both my hands to get the mic. That's disadvantage of being short. But so my question to you today is: is honesty sacrificed in diplomacy, or vice versa?
So the question was, is honesty sacrificed in diplomacy and vice versa? And a trick of answering these questions is to repeat them so you can think of the answer. Given how open our two societies are, there's no alternative to honesty, because you will be found out if you're not going to be honest with your partners and your friends. And what that requires, though, is coming forward with both good news and periodically bad news as well. And that's what relationships are all about. And I think in fact, in diplomacy, if you're not honest, you will have significant setbacks. And in fact, the trust that might have been built up over many years could just evaporate overnight. And at least for me, in my kind of calculus, there may be no more important factor that I look for in people that work with me or for me, or people I sit across the table from. Can I trust them? Are they trustworthy? Do they have high integrity? And I think that's the key in diplomacy. I think that's the key in business. I think that's the key in how you interact with people. So no, I don't think you have to sacrifice your basic values when you engage in diplomacy.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. The SNU students would like to propose a vote of thanks. Do we have a representative from the students?
Thank you, Dr. Sinha. Good afternoon. I deem it a great honor and privilege to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of the Shiv Nadar University to our chief guest, Ambassador Richard Verma, for joining us here this afternoon. Mr. Ambassador, your gracious presence here and your enlightening address in today's function was undoubtedly a great source of inspiration for all of us, and clearly underscores how deeply the United States values India, both as a friend and as a strategic partner. Your visit to SNU in particular highlights the important role we get to play in strengthening the ties between our two nations. Personally, Mr. Ambassador, it is a matter of honor that I will be attending the same graduate school where you pursued your law degree, Georgetown University. I also take this opportunity to thank all the distinguished guests present here, as well as the faculty and staff members of the Shiv Nadar University family for accepting our invitation. Our sincere thanks to the trustees of the Shiv Nadar Foundation for their support and encouragement in organizing this event. Lastly, I would like to thank my fellow students, student volunteers, and the administration team for coordinating this event very smoothly. Thank you all once again for your attendance.